So good afternoon on this third week in Holy Week as we gather together here at Chester Cathedral virtually to reflect on Stations of the Cross as drawn by Irene Ogden. And today we're going to reflect on stations 7, 8 and 9. A number of us are reflecting on Zoom, and Paul Stockbridge, from amongst those who are here on Zoom, is going to be reading the scriptures for us. But many of you may well follow us on YouTube also, in which case you will see my screen shares with each of the stations I will reflect on briefly. And you may, hearing a disembodied voice, be wondering who I am as well. So it's Tim here, Tim Stratford, the Dean at this wonderful cathedral. We are going to begin each of the stations with a little bit of liturgical text. And you'll have to bear with me because I lost my mouse momentarily. I've got it back. It's important to see what you're doing. So station 7, Jesus falls for the second time. We adore you, O Christ, and we praise you, because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world.
Down in the dust I lie prostrate. True to your word, revive me. I tell you my ways, and you answer me. Teach me your wishes. I'm melting away for grief. True to your word, raise me up.
So, words from Psalm 119. And the image that we have before us, the 7th station, captures the World Trade Center on the 11th of September 2001. What I would like to do is simply reflect with you a little on what I'm seeing as I look at these images, and what I'm seeing as I look at these images in the context of them as as one of the stations. The artist writes in the few words she uses to accompany each picture, underneath this picture, the pain of his wounds and the journey to Calvary weaken Jesus, and he falls to the ground a second time. And we see starkly in the image, next to one of the towers still standing, somebody falling into the rubble of the first tower, fallen. On that day in 2001, more than 6,000 people died. I can remember with clarity exactly where I was when I heard the beginnings of what was happening in New York. Those people died, many of them falling. Some fell literally, as we see in this picture, terribly, throwing themselves from the building. Some were in aircraft that were flown head on into the middle of these tall buildings where many people were working, literally people who felt safe in the air were smashed into something that was part of the ground. uh, a terrible day, and the world has never been quite the same since. That image is presented to us also with a representation of Jesus on the ground, the cross on his back loose, he having fallen, carrying it. His falling mirrored by the falling and the deaths of many on that terrible day in 2001. The day he fell, carrying the cross, the day he died, is also a day since when the world has never been the same. The world changed cosmically and eternally on that day when he was crucified. Here, him falling on his way to that death. And of course, Jesus' journey, we are reminded in a brutal way by this image, was actually a journey from heaven to earth. And in his death, he returned. His falling was a falling so very far from the beautiful and loving space that was his alongside his father, to this brutal, awful, painful, oppressed place. But in the station, whilst we identify so very powerfully with the falling, and it is hard to see beyond it, we know that there is redemption, healing, and resurrection from that fall. Holy God, holy and strong, holy and immortal, have mercy upon us. Turn to the eighth station. The eighth station, Jesus meets the women of Jerusalem. We adore you, O Christ, and we praise you, because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world.
Large numbers of people followed him, and women too, who mourned and lamented for him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep rather for yourselves and for your children."
The artist writes under this image, at the sight of the sufferings of Jesus, some holy women in the crowd were so moved that they openly bewailed and lamented for him. Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, weep for yourselves and your children." And I look at that image and see in it women and their children, victims of oppressive occupation, many contemporary images. I spent some time just looking at this and trying to notice what happened in my mind and my thinking as I looked at these harrowing contemporary images. I looked at, if you can see it, the figure in the center right of the image in a cage. I don't know who the artist had in mind when that picture was added, but I held in my mind Nazanin Zaghari Radcliffe. caught in an international dispute over the debt, a result of an arms deal gone wrong, caught as an individual, separated from husband and family across continents. And I reflected on her pain and the pain of those who love her. And then my eye moved to the face right in the middle, just over Jesus' left shoulder, the largest of the contemporary faces in there. I don't know who that is. It's difficult for us to know. It's a child's face. But I found myself recalling images of the Holocaust as I looked at that slightly sepia black and white, soft image. And I remembered the pain of Jesus' people oppressed by a Nazi regime, within our own living memory, if not within our lifetime, within the memory of many of our parents who would have told the stories of those terrible years of the Second World War to us. And thirdly, as I dwelt on this image, I noticed the slightly smaller child's face between the figure in the cage and the figure I've just been talking about, with a headscarf on, and reflected on the plight of Palestinians living in the occupied territories today, under very harsh conditions. It was not long ago I was driven through the West Bank, and going from Jerusalem, in fact, to Galilee, and passing some of the settlements with a road up to the secure settlement from the main road, and a huge red sign on the main road that warned Palestinians that the danger of them going up into the settlement was death. For me, as I gaze on this, there are just three of the things that run through my mind of much pain, represented here in the women and the children of occupation and false imprisonment. And we see Jesus walking through the middle of that. And the connections between the real and awful experience of him in his time and the people who line the road, brought home by these contemporary images, which we can identify with so powerfully today. Jesus meeting the women of Jerusalem, a people who knew the occupation of the Romans. Contemporary images opening our eyes to the world of Jesus' execution, equally terrible. And yet, he brings redemption. Holy God, holy and strong, holy and immortal, have mercy upon us. And I turn to Station 9. Jesus falls for the third time. We adore you, O Christ, and we praise you, because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world.
Ill-treated and afflicted, he never opened his mouth, like a lamb led to the slaughterhouse.
the artist writes under this image, Jesus has nearly reached the summit of Calvary, but before he reaches the spot where he is to be crucified, his strength again fails him, and he falls the third time. So we find ourselves before this image. I have looked and reflected and meditated on what I can see here. I see people escaping, carrying burdens, few belongings, things of little monetary value, but that matter hugely to them, things from home. I see people, perhaps they're wading through water, I can't tell. There appears to be a reflection on the sheen of the surface of the people who are walking this way on the center left of the image. And I see what looks like cruel seas in the top third of this image that Irene Ogden provides for us. And it makes me dwell on the experience today of refugees journeying, hard journeys, physical, dangerous, journeys that bring on intense tiredness and deep fear. Journeys that in many cases have ended by the need to cross significant waterways to escape from the oppression and the threat that refugees seek to remove themselves from, often not knowing the suspicion or hostility even that they may be met with on the other side of the water. Whether that water in our own part of the world be the Mediterranean Sea, as people flee from the African coast to a European coast, or whether it be the English Channel, as we call it, where people seek to find safe harbour in the United Kingdom. But refugees faced with water as they reach the end of their journeys. And as I reflected on that further, I don't know about you, but there is an image seared in my mind, a photograph, a news photograph from 2015 of a little lad dead on the Mediterranean beach at Bodrum in Turkey. His name was Alan Kurdi. He was 3 years old. His family, his father, his mother, and they had one other child as well as Alan, had paid $5,860 for their 4 spaces in an inflatable raft to take them across the Mediterranean. And the raft ran into trouble. 30 people on that raft were to die and be washed up on the beach. Amongst them, Alan and his sibling and his mother. His father survived. And that image possibly changed the way for a while we thought of refugees and their plight. And it certainly changed the giving of people in the wealthy and comfortable West towards the agencies that sought to support them and provide them with safety. This image, which is redolent and resonant of those journeys which end in death for many, bears Jesus having fallen at the end of his journey, his strength having completely failed him under the weight of a cross that was to be where he died. He's fallen and he lies in the bottom left-hand corner of this image amongst those refugees whose strength may also fail them. And again, it draws into the reality of our age, the place that Jesus had in his society, the fear and the suspicion that surrounded him. And yet, at his death, the curtain in the temple is torn in two. The barriers of hostility are broken down. At least the beginnings, the first fruits of a kingdom that we hope will be. Holy God, holy and strong, holy and immortal, have mercy upon us. There'll be an opportunity in a moment or two for those of us who are gathered here on Zoom to reflect on some questions, which I'll put briefly on the screen. For those who are watching on YouTube. But we'll end the YouTube transmission now and allow the conversation to flow freely in our Zoom call.